Hi Skate Pals, I'm Elizabeth from Geek Girl Skates, and in this video I'm bringing you part 1 of the quick start guide to roller skating. This video will be perfect for you if you've never roller skated before, or if it's been, a long time since you last had skates on your feet. So in this video we'll be looking at the essential skills like rolling forwards, coming to a stop, and how to fall safely. And then in the next videos we'll look to build on those skills. If you've just bought your first pair of skates or you've borrowed some off a friend, be sure to give your skates a good once over to make sure that they're correctly adjusted. Not only is skating on incorrectly adjusted skates dangerous, but it can cause a lot of frustration later on. I'll put a link to a video that I've already done on how to adjust your skates in the description below. If you're just learning how to skate, or even if it's been some time, you might want to put some safety equipment on. I would really recommend people wear knee pads, elbow pads, wrist guards, and a helmet. Safety equipment isn't going to prevent all injuries, but it will help to prevent a lot of avoidable ones. I'm a fairly confident skater, so I won't be wearing safety equipment today, except for when we're demoing how to fall on your knees. That said, make sure you take things at your own pace and only progress when you're ready to. In this video, we'll be looking at the essential skills of roller skating. So we'll be looking at how to stand up in your skates, your stance, skating forwards, coming to a stop, and falling safely. All right, let's look at how to actually stand up in skates. If you've just put your skates on and you're on the ground, what I like to do is put my left leg under my right leg and then gently push myself up onto my knee. I put both hands onto my right knee and I'm just going to carefully push myself up. From here, we want to keep our knees nice and bent. We don't want to stand up straight right away because chances are you might just fall backwards and onto your bum, and that's not going to be very pleasant. Now that we're stood up, let's look at skater stance. When you're skating, especially when you're beginning and you're learning to find your balance on your skates, you want to keep your knees nice and bent. And a good way to test to see whether your knees are bent far enough is to look down and look to see if you can see your toes. So if I go like that, then this is a nice stance. We want to keep our torso up, and we don't necessarily want to arch your back or have this uncomfortable rigid stance. We just want to be nice and comfortable and loose. Keep your head up. You don't need to stare at your feet. Your feet know what they're going to be doing. They're going to be going forwards and backwards. Now that we're stood up and we have our nice relaxed stance, we're just going to look at our feet placement. You might find that you start to drift forwards or backwards. This is because of the weight distribution in our boots. So if the weight is in my toes, which you might find if you're wearing a heeled boot, you're going to drift forwards. And if the weight is in the back of my foot, I'm just going to drift backwards a little bit. To avoid this, just try to keep the balance in your feet as neutral as possible. So you want an even weight distribution in the front and back of your boot. Something else we can do to keep ourselves from rolling around is to just change our stance. So with our heels together like this, keeping our knees nice and soft, and this actually will keep us from rolling forwards or backwards. This is a good resting stance to have because you won't just start to drift off on your own. Now that we looked at how to stand up in our roller skates and how to have a good stance, we're going to actually take our first few steps forwards. So starting in our V position, we're just going to take a few steps forwards, bring our feet parallel, and just let ourselves coast out. So from our V position, we'll just take a few steps and let ourselves roll, and we're just going to coast till we stop naturally. Another way we can move forward is to do lemons or bubbles, and this is just making a lemon shape or a bubble shape with your skates, and it's a good way to move yourself forwards. So what we're going to do is we're going to start out with a couple of steps forwards like we did, and then we're going to gently push out and bring our feet back in. When you're doing this, when your feet are coming in, you want it to be kind of a narrow hips width or narrow shoulder width. And when they're out, we don't want it to be like gigantic, because that's going to be really hard. But we want to be like maybe no more than hips width or a little bit more than hips width when we're on the out push. And what this does is it actually lets us like pump and help to propel ourselves forward. If you're finding that you're really struggling with lemons, it might be that you need to get lower. I see a lot of people when they're learning how to do this, they're nice and they're really standing up straight, and they're trying to push it out and bring it back in, push out. And this actually is really difficult. You'll find that it's a lot easier if you get nice and low, because you actually have something to push against. So nice, controlled lemons. And don't worry, like you might find that this is really hard, and these are muscles that most people aren't actually using on a regular basis. I mean, this is a lot of like thigh muscle and inner thigh muscle. You might even find that those muscles are a little bit sore the next day. But you will get this, and it just takes a lot of practice to build up that muscle memory. So the next essential skill we're going to look at is how to actually stop on our skates. This is a really important skill to have, because it means that we can dodge unexpected obstacles, or if you've got children or pets around you while you're learning how to skate, you need to be able to stop in front of them. So you've probably already figured out my first way for beginners to learn how to stop, and that's just to use something around you that you can hold on to come to a stop. This could be a wall, it could be a chair, it could be your refrigerator, whatever. But just make sure that if you're going at full force into something like an immovable wall, that you bend your elbows, and that you use these as like shock absorbers when you're rolling into something. Otherwise, you will get that going up into your shoulder, and that's going to hurt. You also want to make sure you keep your knees nice and bent, because if you're hitting that wall with a lot of force, you're going to have a tendency to fall backwards as well. So nice bent knees will prevent you from falling. And if you are wearing knee pads, a great way to fall, and I also use this if it's like an emergency stop, and I'll just kind of take a knee, but do not do this if you're not wearing knee pads. We'll talk a little bit more about this in the next section on how to fall safely. And my third method for stopping for beginners is to use our toe stops. I mean, these are roller skates after all, and they do have stoppers on them. But what I see a lot of beginners doing is like really digging in and dragging their toe along. And what this is going to do is actually eat into the use wear of our toe stops. And we don't really need that much pressure on our skates when we're doing this. It's much better if you can turn your foot out slightly to the side, because this means that the surface of the toe stop is actually touching the ground. So I've got this slight V shape with my skates when I'm doing this. And what I'll do is just roll along, turn my foot out, and just lightly drag it on the ground. I'm not digging in. We don't want ka-chunk, 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 ka-chunk as we're rolling along. We just want a nice gentle pressure with our toe stops as we're rolling along. The last essential skill that I want to cover in this video is how to fall, and how to fall safely. Falling is just part of roller skating, it's part of learning, and as a beginner roller skater, you will fall. And it's probably best just to accept it. And don't think, oh, if I'd fall, then I'm not a very good roller skater, because advanced skaters fall all the time as well. It just happens. I mean, there could be a little stone in your way and you'll just fall. It's part of roller skating. So it's probably best to just embrace that at the start, rather than getting hung up on it as you're learning. Falling happens. And this is why I recommend that people wear protective equipment as much as possible, or depending on your setting and your location. When people do fall, they will fall forwards or they'll fall backwards. Obviously, it's better to learn to avoid falling altogether, because it can prevent injury, especially if you're not wearing safety equipment. And to do this, you'll want to keep yourself as low to the ground as possible with your nice bent knees, and build some stability by, putting your arms out or even just off to the side. Just make sure your shoulders are nice and loose as well. And if you feel yourself falling forwards or you're going backwards, if you can bring yourself back to this low stance, you might even save yourself from falling in the first place. And if you do fall, at least it's a much shorter distance to the ground, either forwards or backwards. Okay, so let's say you do fall. If you're wearing knee protection, then you can easily just take a knee going forwards. I mean, this is all right. If you've got nice squishy knee pads, this might actually be pretty comfortable. So let's say I'm skating along, nice and low, hit a rock, oh no, and I just go down and I take a knee. Oh, and everything's okay because I've got knee protection on and we are all good. From this position, we're just going to put our hands on our knee like we did when we were standing up at the beginning of the video, and just carefully and slowly push ourselves back up. Make sure you come back to this nice bent knee stance and just carry on. You styled it out, like it doesn't even matter. When you're falling, you might actually fall on both knees, and it's much better if you do this if you fall on one knee at a time. So, oh no, I'm down, 1, 2. That's one knee and then the second knee. We want to make sure that we're not falling on both knees at the same time, because this can also lead to injury, and we want to avoid that if at all possible. So from this position, I'm going to bring one knee back up, put my hands on my knee, and just slowly push myself back up. Okay, no harm done, and we style it out. So of course the other way you can fall is to fall backwards. This will happen to you. If you can avoid it at all, you want to avoid falling on the middle of your butt or just like centrally on your butt. You want to try and land on the meaty part of your leg. So your thigh is probably the best place for you to land. You want to land on squishy stuff, basically. So let's say that you're skating along and you feel like you're gonna fall, you lose your balance, and you're gonna go down, and you're gonna go down like that. Okay, so I've put my hand out to kind of stop myself. I think that's just a natural reflex that most people have, but we want to bring that in front of ourselves as quickly as possible, especially if you're in an area where there's traffic or other skaters, because your feet will get run over if you don't do that. So from here, it's just a case of bringing your leg under the other one like we did at the beginning of the video, and bringing ourselves back up, dust ourselves off, and carry on skating. I know it might seem silly learning how to fall safely, but sometimes the fear of falling can actually be worse than the action of falling, and even the shock from a fall can be worse, and falling oftentimes isn't even that bad. In this video, we've covered some of the essential skills for learning how to roller skate, and I really hope that this video gets you off to a good start on your roller skating journey. Be sure to check out videos 2 and 3, where we'll be building on these skills by looking at more ways to stop. We'll be looking at some backwards skating and transitioning from backwards to forwards and forwards to backwards. Okay, well, I hope you have a fantastic time learning how to roller skate. That's all for now, and keep roller skating.